We live in the age of information, and as a leader, your team and organization rely on you to have good judgment and make the right decision with the information you have. While it's tempting to think that someone who always seems to make the right call is just lucky or has good intuition, the reality is that good decisions are the product of strong critical thinking skills and thoughtful problem solving. My name is Eric Zackerson. I'm a professor, consultant, and I've managed and owned businesses for nearly 30 years. I can tell you with confidence that even in the most successful businesses, problems are unavoidable. Putting in the time to make sure you're prepared to deal with them and find viable solutions is what really makes the difference. In this course, I'll give you strategies you need to start improving your critical thinking skills and become a more adept problem solver. I'll teach you how to test your own biases and assess information, and walk you through common brainstorming mistakes that could take you and your team down the wrong path. I'll share with you strategies for solving both monumental and day-to-day problems, and give you a functional approach for how to generate, vet, and implement your best ideas. By the end of this course, you'll be equipped to avoid common mistakes and start becoming the savvy, knowledgeable leader I know you can be. So, if you're ready to start becoming a more critical thinker, let's go. We see it all the time on social media these days. One person will make a comment and then another will chime in, and all of a sudden an argument is underway. The end result of this is almost always that neither side makes any real headway, and more importantly, neither side takes the time to even attempt to understand the person they're arguing with. This phenomenon highlights a deterioration in our ability to think critically and to have civil discussions with one another. The key part often missing in these and many other conversations is a real attempt to put aside our biases and to make sure we understand what we're hearing. There are a few things to consider that can improve your ability to think critically and to help make sure you're engaging with others honestly. Let's first look at biases. I have them, you have them. They're why my brother-in-law and I can get such drastically different meanings from the same political speech. We literally hear different things. Biases affect your ability to critically engage in more ways than politics, though. They also affect your ability to hear what your employees are saying or what you might hear in personal conversations. Biases come from a variety of sources. Some stem from how you were raised, others are based on your experiences in the world, and others come from our personalities. We interpret others' actions and statements based on these biases, whether we mean to or not. There are 3 steps you can take to identify and eliminate biases from affecting your interpretations. First, do some self-analysis. This should always start with self-reflection, where you honestly look at those times where you misinterpreted someone and try to understand why. It should involve having open and honest conversations with trusted people around you, and it can involve taking assessments to identify biases and other perspectives. Next, take time before any important conversations to consciously attempt to put aside your biases. Next time an employee comes in, don't assume anything about what they're saying. Stay neutral until you have all the facts. The third step here is to force yourself to take other perspectives. You can do this by literally saying to yourself, if I thought the opposite of what I do now, how would I argue for that? Anytime you try putting yourself into different mindsets, you're more likely to gain a better understanding of the issue and to be better at avoiding biases. Another important piece of this picture is to check your understanding. This goes hand in hand with avoiding biases, but the emphasis here is more on ensuring you have a really thorough understanding of the topic. This step is about actively engaging with the person or the content. To clarify your thinking about the topic, use some of these tricks. Try restating another position in your own words, or asking for or giving examples. Or try to summarize the main points of the conversation, or offer your perspective to a trusted friend and ask for feedback. You can also do these things when offering your thoughts, or to clarify your thoughts before engaging. Can you state your main point in a clear and concise sentence? Can you offer other examples to support your main point? Or can you give an analogy that illustrates your main point? Having a thorough understanding of yourself and of the topic at hand is an essential foundation for thinking critically and for engaging well with others. So next time you find yourself typing a witty reply in that comment box, take a moment to ask yourself some of the questions you learned in this lesson. Right now, I have 2 kids who are going to school remotely. My 14-year-old daughter is really handling it great. She has a spot in her room that's her school. She shuts her door during class and takes the time beforehand to make sure everything is ready to go. My 10-year-old son, on the other hand, is having a much harder time. Regardless of the space we set for him and our attempts to get him ready, he just gets distracted. He's trying to get the dog on his lap, or staring out the window, or asking me a question from the other room. Based on the level of focus they're demonstrating, I can clearly see the difference in how well they're understanding and thinking critically about what they're learning. The same goes for us. If you want to be the best critical thinker you can be, you need to make sure that you can stay focused. There are some best practices that can help you with doing that. Some of the most important steps you can take to stay focused is preparing ahead of time. This involves both physical and mental preparation. Physically, you should make sure you're well rested and sufficiently fed. Some of you are probably the type that get hangry. If so, I can say you're definitely not thinking critically when you're hangry. The mother of my children is this way. So she always keeps her granola bar at the ready to prepare to really pay attention. Or maybe you're the type of person that hits a slump right after lunch. If this is you, don't eat a big lunch right before an important meeting. Or try to schedule meetings when you know you'll be fresh. You should also get yourself in the right headspace. This includes removing these biases that we've already talked about and preparing yourself to focus. One thing I try to do before a big meeting or an important lecture is to meditate. Even 10 minutes of meditation gets my mind ready to be present. Preparation isn't just about you, though. Take a moment to make sure the space is conducive to you being able to focus. This includes removing any distractions, TV screens off, radio off, or anything else that will distract you. I let my kids know that I'm going into an important meeting so they know to wait until it's over to ask me any questions. It also includes making sure that the space is set up well and that you have what you need. Is the seating comfortable but not too comfortable? If you need to take notes, do you already have paper ready? Finally, have you created an agenda for the meeting or conversation? Have you made sure you understand the core issues at hand? And do you know what you think is important to discuss? Having a plan enables you to follow along and limits the chance that your mind will wander. Once you've prepared, it's time to actually focus on the meeting. Stick to the agenda you've prepared, but be flexible if in the process of discussion something new comes up that needs to be added. Make sure that you don't digress from the main point and how it's supported, unless it's to explore other relevant viewpoints on the same matter. Occasionally check in with yourself, and even the other person to ask, are we on track? Is this helping us understand what we need to understand? Finally, check in at the end of the conversation to make sure you have a clear understanding of what was discussed and that the initial problem or question was addressed successfully. By preparing well and focusing your energies, you're going to be a more critical thinker who's able to solve problems more effectively. I once had a client, let's call him George. It was a bit of a challenge for me. Some people on his team thought he wasn't very bright, others thought he was just a jerk, and still others thought he didn't know they existed. The thing is, George wanted to be a good leader, and he wanted to hear what they had to say. He just didn't do a good job of listening to them. He would show up with his ideas already in his head and wouldn't take the time to ensure he actually knew what the heck people were talking about. People were frustrated with him because they would say one thing and George would do something else. My biggest win with George, and to be honest, his biggest win with his team, was when I convinced him of the power of questions. Questions are an essential tool to help you become a more critical thinker and a better leader. As a leader or manager, it's often wise to start with questions. It's a way to make sure that your team feels engaged and to check your assumptions at the door. Even if you have an idea of a suggestion you'd like to make, you can ask a question rather than offering your own opinions. By offering your opinion as a leader right away, you can sometimes stifle dissent. But you want to hear your team's idea. So you could say, one option is this. What are your thoughts on that? You can also use questions to get deeper into a problem. Often the stated issue is not really the issue, and a good critical thinker wants to know what the underlying needs, motivations, and influences are. You can ask, what does that do for you? Why is that important? Or what would happen if X? This helps you gain a deeper understanding and a stronger base to have further discussions and solve problems. Questions are also helpful if you don't quite understand. Just ask, can you help me understand that? Why do you think this should be? Or am I right that you mean X? All of these make sure that you're on the same page. Do not let ego get in the way. One of George's issues was that he wouldn't ask a question, even if he didn't understand something, because he thought it showed weakness. It absolutely does not. If anything, it tells the other person you're genuinely listening and are eager to know more. Finally, use questions to check your assumptions. You might have assumptions about how you think someone feels, but asking a question can show you when you may be wrong. You can ask, so it seems like you're angry about this, is that right? Or, why does this excite you? Your questions can also be about facts. It seems that the important steps are 1, 2, 3, is that right? Or, I want to make sure I'm right in what I'm hearing. No matter the context, questions create the opportunity for other people to share and can help you guide the conversation and them towards a positive solution. I am definitely one of those people who starts by trusting people, and I usually assume people are telling the truth. However, I'm notoriously tough on sources, and I'm not afraid to dig deep into a source to make sure it's reliable. Making sure you have the best data possible is an essential part of analysis, which in turn is an essential part of critical thinking. To make sure that your decisions and solutions are based on solid footing, you need to double check that your sources are trustworthy. When analyzing a source of information, you should ask the following questions. First, what is the purpose of the information? There's always an underlying reason the information exists, and knowing what that is key. The purpose may be completely innocent, like just wanting to help people to be informed. But even in these situations, the source may be guided by unconscious biases or by the sources that they're relying on. They may want to make sure that their side is understood or that someone else's voice is heard. Other times, there are underlying nefarious reasons you need to be aware of. So always ask, what are they getting out of this? What do they have to gain? Next, determine where they're getting their information from. If you're listening to a speaker, you can always ask for their sources afterwards. And if it's something written, they should freely supply the sources. And if they don't, that's a big warning sign. Asking questions of a source shouldn't just end with the first person. Look deeper and ask, do the places they get their data from have an agenda? Are they varied in their sources? Is the source an authority or just someone offering an opinion? If you're looking at research, ask, was this ever published in a peer-reviewed journal? Finally, examine what is being said or written and try to find what's being overlooked. What issues are being raised, and more importantly, what issues are not being raised. Then seek out varied sources that offer alternative views. If you're careful about checking the veracity of the information you're about to use, you're going to have better information to work from and are much more likely to make better decisions and solve more problems. I encourage you to think about the last piece of information you heard. How did you know it was true? What questions could you ask to better analyze that information? See what you come up with. One of my biggest mistakes as an absentee owner was not making it clear enough to my team what they were and weren't allowed to make decisions on. I assumed that they knew, but the reality was that they ended up stagnating and froze. Thankfully, one member of the team brought it to my attention, and we were able to solve the problem before it ended up in ruin. But it made me start paying closer attention to problem solving. You and your team should always know the parameters of decision making, so things can always stay moving. The first parameter is who is making the decisions. This can be broken up into 4 general types. The first is decision by the leader, called autocratic decision making. This makes sense if any of the following features may apply. Time is short, you have an inexperienced team, there's a crisis, or if there are legal, ethical, or other high-impact ramifications if the wrong choice is taken. Second is decision-making by the leader with input, called participatory decision-making. This is when you, as the leader, get input but ultimately make the final decision. This makes sense in the following cases. You realize that others may have valuable input or expertise. You need more commitment to the final say, and you need people to feel listened to. Understand, though, if you don't take the advice, you need to engage them and let them know why. Third, decision by majority vote. This is a good option in the following scenarios. You have the time to take to make a good decision. You're not tied to a specific outcome because no, the team may choose something you didn't want. The team has access to the information they need to make the decision. You need higher engagement and commitment to the results. Be aware, though, that if there's a consistent loser, that loser may start to become disgruntled. Finally, decision by consensus. This is actually closer to majority vote usually, as often there are at least a few people that just agree with the majority to end the conversation. The same things need to be in place as with majority vote, but with the following additions. You really need everyone's full commitment, and you have a lot of time. The second parameter you need to consider is the degrees of freedom. You must be clear about the range of possibilities that you or your team can genuinely consider. This was one of the biggest challenges for my team when they got stuck. Now they know that for any decision, it must abide by a monthly budget, an event budget, and some other general guidelines. Recently, they were problem solving to overcome a loss of income and looking for solutions, but they knew that I wouldn't allow steep discounts like buy one, get one free. With that knowledge, they feel, ironically, more free now that they know what's out of bounds. You need to make these parameters clear for yourself and for your team. Find out which decisions fall into which decision-making category from the perspective of your boss and for your team. Make sure you have a clear understanding with your supervisor what your degrees of freedom are with any decisions, and do the same thing with your team. Oddly enough, having these restrictions will give you and your team more freedom and confidence in making decisions by removing uncertainty and improving focus. I occasionally do an experiment on my graduate student teams. I tell them to make a decision, and then I give some of them a structure for making that decision, often something as simple as, I want everyone to offer their opinion about the option before you vote on a final choice. And then I give the others no structure at all. What happens is exactly what research says will happen. The teams that have just that little bit of structure make substantially better decisions and better manage their conflict. Interestingly, research shows that any structure leads to this improvement, but not that necessarily more structure does. I want to show you a couple simple problem-solving methods you can use with your groups to introduce a little bit of structure to help you make better decisions and solve problems more effectively. The first is called the nominal group technique. This can be done with limited time and is an ideal way to make sure that everyone gets to be involved. Scholars have outlined the method using between 4 and 6 steps, but the 4 most common are these. 1. The silent listing of ideas. After you've outlined the problem you want them to solve, you give the group 20 minutes to write down every good idea they can come up with. 2. The creation of a master idea list. Here, acting as the facilitator, go in round-robin fashion, asking each person to offer their best idea. Then you go around the room again and again, asking them to share their next best idea until everyone has shared all of their ideas. You can just put a tick mark next to repeat ideas. 3. The clarification of ideas. At this stage, the group can ask others for clarification. This also allows everyone to more fully expand and clarify their own ideas. Usually you only need clarification on a few ideas, but this can take longer for more complex problems. Finally, an anonymous vote on which idea is best. If you're lucky, at this stage, a clear winner will emerge. You may end up with several that come to the top, or a true diversity of opinions. But at least from here, you're in a better position to have an informed discussion and move forward. Another helpful structure for decision-making is the single question technique, developed by Carl Larson. Like the nominal group technique, the single question technique is useful when time is short. These 5 steps include: identify the single question that the group needs to know to accomplish its purpose. 2. Identify the sub-questions that must be answered in order to answer the single question. 3. Determine whether you have enough information to answer the sub-questions. If yes, then answer them and move to step 5. If not, move to step 4. Step 4. Determine the most reasonable answers to the sub-questions. Step 5. Assuming that your answers are correct, determine the best solution. As noted, these are pretty simple approaches and are designed for more simple problems. There are also many others out there that might guide you, but these will certainly help. The next time your team or group gathers, I want you to try one of these out. You might get a little pushback, but see if you can make it a challenge for them. Say, let's just try it and see what it's like. As you put more structure into your problem solving, you're going to be amazed at not just how much better your decisions are, but also how much better the process of decision making is. There are times when a simple problem-solving procedure just isn't going to cut it. For example, the University of California recently revamped its entire payroll and human resources systems. That change affected 14 different stakeholder institutions and over 100,000 employees. This was a huge change that required a massive problem-solving process to get it right. Most of us won't be involved in problem-solving at this scale, but you should be aware of at least one method that's used in larger problems so you're prepared if you are faced with needing to solve a problem of that scale. One of the longest standing methods is called PERT, Program Evaluation and Review Technique. It was developed by the US Navy in the 50s, and it involves 8 steps. First, you start by stating the final event or goal of the project. You need to make sure the planning team clearly defines the event that must take place. That might be opening a new facility to accommodate increased production, or it might be rolling out a new payroll system across all UC campuses and affiliated organizations. Second, list the events that must happen before the final event can occur. At this point, you don't want your team to worry so much about chronological order, but you should explore anything that needs to occur for sub-events. For example, in planning to open a new restaurant, I would list train staff and install kitchen equipment. But I would also note, in order to train staff, I need to hire them, and I would need to develop training materials. And in order to hire them, I need to recruit them, and so forth. Third, you assess the order of events. Your group should lay out all of the events that must occur and the order that they must occur. In doing this, you should identify which events rely on others and so need to come before them, as well as noting things that can occur at the same time. Fourth, once you have the timeline, you should create a diagram that connects all the events in chronological order. I've seen these cover entire huge walls, but they can also be created digitally. Fifth, now you should lay out the specific activities that need to occur between events. These should include strategic action plans for moving from event to event, resource acquisitions needed, etc. Now, sixth, at this point, you and the team should identify the amount of time needed for the whole project, including breaking down the specific time needed for each sub-event. Seventh, you've likely been thinking about feasibility throughout the process, but at the second to last step, you should take a full and detailed look at all of the steps, events, and components of the plan. Now ask yourself the big question, is it feasible? If it isn't, figure out why not and what adjustments need to be made to make it so. Maybe you have to consider extending the project. Honesty and openness are key here. In the final step, You need to isolate your critical path forward. You and your team should identify those more critical and difficult tasks and make sure that the resources are allocated where needed in order to keep the plan on schedule. While this process is often used for very large projects, as I mentioned earlier, that doesn't mean it's only helpful for large organizations. Even if you run a small team, sometimes you need to make really big, impactful changes that may have lots of small or tedious parts. Taking time to build your plan in advance can absolutely be the difference between crashing and burning and pulling off something great. My experience with new groups is extensive. Every quarter, I put together up to 20 new groups. I have several leadership projects that involve me putting people into project groups, and regularly I'm brought in to help new groups create a positive culture and a team relationship. In each of these, I get to see groups tackle issues, and what I so often see is that they just rush into finding a solution. They immediately go to what they're going to do before fully understanding what they're trying to solve. Now, with classroom groups, I will often let the students make the mistake and use it as a learning moment. But with the leadership groups and with client groups, I quickly bring them to a discussion about the importance of understanding the problem at hand. There are several things that I share with them that will help you guide your problem solving as well. First, you have to examine the type of claim. There are several types of claims that a person or a group can make. Statements of fact. When you determine whether something is true or not, is the statement empirically verifiable? It could be a statement of value. When you determine whether something is worthy, good, or beneficial. These are a little trickier because you need to assess things that are not bounded by objective views. Values can be subjective, so consider the source to understand where the value is coming from. There are also statements of policy. When you argue for a change to the status quo. Most of these statements are supported by statements of value and statements of fact. Here you need to look to stakeholders and assess how they're potentially going to be affected. After you determine the type of claim, then you need to make sure that everyone sees the problem at hand. This sounds easy, but it's not uncommon that someone on the group has more or less information than other people. It's important to talk through all of the information and make sure that everyone is on the same page. One trick I've used here is to have everyone individually write down their thoughts on what the issues are and then share. This tends to highlight differences. When you can align to identify the problem first, you'll likely reduce wasted time, rework, and frustrations, and solve the problem more efficiently as a team. Every single academic quarter, I see the same thing happen, and every time I shake my head just a little bit. In my management class, I teach a whole week devoted to decision making. On day one, we go over decision making. We identify that structure is needed for good decisions, and I emphasize how outlining the criteria for positive solutions is of primary importance. I say several times, the main thing you want to do is figure out how you're going to know if you've made a good decision. I then put the students in their groups, give them the problem to solve, and watch them completely ignore everything I've said. Sure, there are a few that have listened, and they're the ones who generally come up with a better solution. But for the most part, everyone ignores their criteria step and goes straight to the problem-solving step. So I'll tell you what I remind my students. The only way you can be sure your decision is good is if you've set the criteria for assessing the choice as good or bad. Here are a few questions that you can ask yourself to help you establish a successful assessment criteria. First, what are the practical concerns? To assess this, you need to think about the skills you and your team have, the amount of time available, resource capabilities, or any other practical concern. For instance, my team at my restaurant met to talk about having a float in the local St. Patrick's Day parade. Some of the practical criteria we had to address included the float could be no bigger than the garage we were storing it in. We only had 120 hours budgeted to complete it. And we had to have someone other than staff in the actual parade because all of us would be working. Practical concerns are a fundamental pillar of criteria. If something is impractical, it's just not a great option. Next, ask what are the economic concerns. You'll likely determine your maximum budget pretty easily, but you might also need to consider setting a lower limit as well. I strongly recommend setting a top and bottom cost limit. Sometimes a low-cost option may actually be too low if it doesn't offer the challenge, scope, or optics that you need. Next, are there ethical guidelines you and your team need to consider? You and your team need to determine what options are on or off the table in terms of ethics. An important step here is to get your team to take other stakeholders' perspectives and ask what are some of the actions that they may see as unethical or harmful. Finally, are there any legal ramifications? These are likely easy to spot, but not always. Taking the time here can save an awful lot of headaches later. For instance, my restaurant management teams have missed some weird laws as they worked through solutions. Once, the team came to me with 2 ideas for boosting business on a slow Monday night. The first idea was to have a teen night where we didn't serve drinks, but had games and such. The other idea was to advertise an all-day happy hour. Both of these ideas turned out to be illegal in that town. There may be other criteria you need to think about. Maybe you have certain sign-offs that must happen, or you have a certain division or team that can't be impacted. Whatever the case, the more clearly you identify your criteria, the more likely your solution is going to actually solve the problem. One of my favorite things to do professionally and personally is to play with potential. I love to not only come up with ideas, but also to facilitate others doing the same thing. Even when I'm facilitating and know that I have to keep my ideas out, it can still be so much fun. There are a number of tools that can help you come up with solutions that will lead you and your team to find the best solution. One of my favorite methods is brainstorming. Many people think they know what brainstorming is. You may think of coming up with ideas in class or just throwing ideas out among friends, but there are a few specific steps that make brainstorming a powerful tool. Ideally, you want to have a facilitator, someone that is not directly involved in coming up with ideas. The facilitator should frame the problem for the group and offer some time for people to ask questions so everyone knows what they're coming up with ideas for. The facilitator should state the rules. No evaluation. No talking down ideas, but also no talking up ideas. Just throw ideas out. Now, you can build on ideas. This is one of the key ways brainstorming works really well. The facilitator should keep things going and make sure people are engaging. It's totally okay to say, "Okay, Beatrice, what are your ideas?" If you have members of your team that are either prone to being quiet or prone to overwhelming conversation, you might want to look at buzz groups. To use buzz groups, you start the process the same as you would with brainstorming by making sure everyone is clear to the problem and the boundaries of the decisions. You then divide everyone up into smaller groups of 6 to 8 people and have them work together to come up with ideas. In this situation, those quieter people are more likely to speak up and those louder folks are more likely to tone it down. You then can bring everyone together to share their ideas. Another great method that you can do individually in small groups or even in large groups is mind mapping. Mind mapping is a visual process in which you take one concept and then draw other related ideas coming off that idea, and then continue. For instance, in the restaurant industry, you may be trying to solve why income from food has declined. So you could start by drawing declined sales in a circle. Then maybe you think, okay, well, it could be purchasing, so draw that circle. Or increased waste, draw that circle as well. Then you think, well, waste could be not prepping right, or it could be over prepping. So you draw those 2 circles off of waste. And you continue with this until you've exhausted all the ideas. Pick a problem and map your solutions. You can also check out other methods like Scamper or the 6 hats of thinking. These are other guided methodologies that can help you frame your ideas. Regardless of the method you choose, what you want during your brainstorming stage is ideas. The more, the merrier. I would rather you have too many ideas on the table and not need them versus needing an idea that's just not on the table. Anyone that knows me knows I like to focus on the positive and come up with ideas. At the same time, I also know that you have to eliminate ideas sometimes. Some people might see that as focusing on the negative, but it really isn't. No matter how optimistic you are, you need to eliminate certain ideas to focus on the ones that move you forward. Here are a few ways that you can narrow down your choices and find the best one to pursue. The first place you need to consider is the assessment criteria you've already established. Any options that fall outside your criteria need to be eliminated. Another way to vet options is through multi-voting. Full disclosure, I love multi-voting. I actually have clients that give me trouble about how many little sticky dots I own. Multi-voting is where you put several ideas up on a board and then give the participants a number of votes represented by stickers. They then come up and put the sticker on the idea they like most. There are a couple different variations on this. One clear demonstration of how it can be used is how I use it with one community leadership development program I facilitate. When they sit down to determine what community need topics they're going to cover that year, we start with brainstorming and then cluster those ideas. Usually they end up with between 8 and 10 ideas. I then give everyone 3 stickers, 1 red, 1 green, and 1 blue. They are then instructed to put the green sticker on the topic they find most important, the red on one they find least, and the blue on one they find interesting but not the most important. What emerges is that there are several options that few want to do, and a couple that many people find important. The blue is good to highlight secondary issues that might be interesting. This technique can also be good when you know there's a bad idea that someone likes, but confronting them directly might lead to issues. When they see that there are a bunch of red stickers on their idea, they can bow out without losing much face. You can also use the positive, negative, interesting exercise. So with each idea, you ask people to write 1 positive, 1 negative, and 1 interesting thing. What tends to happen is the better ideas end up coming on top. Some other techniques include doing a cost-benefit analysis, using 2x2 matrices, and evaluating sources of information and stakeholder effects. The best advice I can give you here is do not shoot for perfect. It won't likely happen. Find the best choice given the amount of information, the amount of time, and the amount of available resources you've got. If you do this consistently, you're going to win much more often than you don't, and more importantly, your team and your managers will see you as a strong, effective leader. Most of you would probably not be surprised to know just how many times I've seen individuals, teams, and organizations come up with solutions only to let them sit on the table unresolved. I would also venture to guess that most of you had experienced something similar. A sense of déjà vu when you're in a meeting addressing the same problem that the group had discussed and solved last year or even last month. This happens way too often. It's usually a result of two common errors in problem solving. The first is not putting a plan in place, and the second is not having a way to assess if the plan actually worked. So make sure you actually have a plan to move forward with. It's great to find the solution and to come to a great conclusion, but part of that has to be laying out how you're going to make it a reality. A good action plan includes several key pieces. What exactly needs to get done? Go step by step. Who is doing these things? Each item should have a name attached to it. Who is responsible for making sure the task is accomplished? By when? Be specific about when each of the things should be done. What resources are needed, and when are those resources needed? What do your teammates need? When do they need it? And who's responsible for getting those things there? Are there checkpoints for seeing if you are on track and making progress? Finally, and this is important to remember, who is in supporting roles? Are there people that need to be reported to, used as resources, or included in key steps? All people that have any role at all should know when and how they're involved. So you found your solution, laid out your plan, executed the plan, and now you need to determine if your solution really worked. You need to assess your success. So to do this, you need to make sure that you've articulated the final result in measurable, specific ways. You need to make sure that the final result can be measured against a timeline or a deadline. Assessments need to take into account budget, timeliness, and satisfaction of the team. Make sure there's opportunities for feedback from all stakeholders involved to highlight things that are going well as those things that aren't aligning. It's here that you should use an iterative process. Assess, problem solve, plan, put in place, assess, and restart. You should always look for ways to improve. So when you take a look at a problem you've solved, how well did you roll out the solution? Are there ways you could have improved it? The next time you look to solve a problem, put a plan in place to not only make sure it happens, but that you're able to assess its success and correct as needed. When my son was 3 or 4, we took a flight over to Sweden, and 3 times in a row, the captain turned on the seatbelt light, said that we were coming up on some turbulence, and then, sure enough, we hit some turbulence. After the 3rd time this happened, my son looked at me and asked, "Why do they turn that light on if it's going to cause the plane to shake?" Now, I know this sounds totally silly to us, but misuses of logic trick each and every one of us, occasionally. I want to help you see a few common logical fallacies so you can avoid using them yourself, and you can recognize them when others try to use them on you. One of the most common is the ad hominem attack. This is an attack on an opponent's character rather than an answer to the contentions made. We see this all the time in politics. Candidates on a debate stage will call each other crooked or a con man or just plain dumb. None of these phrases offer any true reasoning for belief or disbelief. They're designed to paint a character portrait and trigger an emotional response in the voters. These are pretty blatant examples, but ad hominem attacks can get pretty subtle. Things like, as an academic, it must be hard to see things from the point of view of the working class. Or, as a woman in leadership, it must be hard to keep your emotions in check. There are a lot of assumptions happening here. Another common fallacy you'll likely face is the straw man argument. This is where someone attacks your position by creating a similar claim that's easy to attack. They can do this by either oversimplifying your claim, leaving out key parts of your claim, or focusing on only one key part. An old argument is the argument against evolution. How can we evolve from chimpanzees if chimpanzees are still around? Well, that's not really the point, because the argument isn't about the evolution of chimpanzees. Strawman arguments can be hard to catch and hard to refute. To defend against them, be ready to restate your claim and call out the strawman argument for what it is, irrelevant and a non sequitur. Another logical fallacy you may encounter is the appeal to ignorance. If the same argument can be used to support both sides, it's an indication that there's a flaw. No one has ever been able to prove that Bigfoot exists, so he must not exist. Or, no one has ever proved Bigfoot doesn't exist, so he must exist. It's a catch-22 and, frankly, a waste of time. Ad hoc fallacies, or false causation, is another common flaw in logical thinking. This is what my son was using on the airplane. Just because something happens after something does not mean it was caused by it. There are plenty of logical fallacies that use others' actions or opinions as evidence. These are called bandwagon appeals. The everyone is doing it argument, that the majority must be right. Additionally, halo appeals and horn appeals fit here. Halo and horn appeals point to people you either look up to or people you don't to persuade you. Unless that person or the group of people are experts, you should generally question these types of appeals. There are many other logical fallacies out there, and I encourage you to familiarize yourself with them. There are even great courses on this platform that can help you improve your critical thinking and debate skills. Oftentimes, people actually don't realize that their logic is flawed. The more you understand the various types of logical fallacies people can and will bring against your ideas, the more likely you are to be able to avoid being convinced by them and by doing it yourself. You have likely heard the famous Mark Twain quote, "Facts are stubborn things, but statistics are pliable." When I teach students how to be more persuasive in their presentations, I spend a lot of time on how to present data and how to use statistics, and all the ways that data can be manipulated to say what you want it to say. In this lesson, I'll point out a few common data manipulation methods so that you can keep an eye out for them and know how to look past them. The first is related to false causation, but it goes one step further by using charts to show how two things correlate over time. You're likely to see right through my claim that increases in Nicolas Cage movies cause more accidents in home pools. But the correlation's there. Since 1999, these two statistics have moved really closely. Coincidence? Sure. Causation? Highly unlikely. Another common statistics manipulation is to visualize data using a truncated y-axis, which is also called omitting the baseline. This is often used when comparing two or more things where the difference is really not that great. I had a student group conduct market validation activity in which they were comparing three options. Option 1 had 62 votes, option 2 had 54, and option 3 had 52. On their presentation chart, they omitted the baseline. They set 50 as the baseline rather than 0, which made the difference between the three seem much bigger than it really was. Similarly, you can manipulate the y-axis so that changes look smaller than they are. I once helped a restaurant try to get their costs in line. I knew that they were jumping all over the place, so I met with the manager in charge to discuss the issue. He really didn't want attention brought to the recent shifts, so he showed me a chart of his costs over time. What he had done was take the y-axis and have it represent a much larger span of costs, making the jumps much less noticeable. Also, watch out for cherry-picked data that manipulates the x-axis to highlight only areas that you want to see. For example, if sales increased in the first quarter of a year, but A had been decreasing for 2 years before and B had started to decrease again afterwards, you could have a chart that only showed January through March, thus making it look like sales were doing really well. Cherry picking doesn't have to just be in a graph. Most commonly, you'll see it when people are only sharing data that supports their claims. Ask for comparative analysis for a fuller picture. There are so many other ways that data can be manipulated, often without negative intent. You may even do it yourself. So you should consume all data with care. Look for ways it could be misinterpreted before you use it to make important decisions. Encourage your team to always provide full, accurate data so you can make truly informed decisions and move forward with confidence. Great groups make terrible decisions sometimes. I've been part of it. I had an amazing team running 3 establishments, and I had the genius idea to do one more with a partner. It was a terrible idea. None of us saw it at the time, but in hindsight, the issue should have been abundantly clear. Me and my management team were in good company, though. JFK and his cabinet got it in their heads that the Bay of Pigs invasion was a good idea. This was the basis for the term groupthink. There are a number of pitfalls even good groups can fall into that can derail critical thinking and good problem solving. I want to identify these for you and offer a few tricks to counter them. One of the odd ways that groups can go awry is actually ending up more extreme than any one member started. This can happen in 2 ways. Say you lean towards one idea and Angela leans the other way. As you go back and forth defending your ideas, what naturally happens is you become more and more extreme in your support of your ideas, and she in hers. So when you finally settle on something, you've likely chosen a solution that is more extreme than anyone in the group originally was. And a word of caution, this can become much more intense when there's a sense of inside groups against outside groups. Another way this can happen is that as you decide between ideas, you get more and more excited about an idea, and sometimes forget what some of the initial detractors were. To solve for this, one thing you can do is to pause for a moment before you make the final decision. Talk about why you didn't take it up immediately, and talk through some reasons against it. Groups can also center themselves. This occurs when groups too readily focus on agreement rather than dissent. If 2 people come forward as supporting an idea, it's less likely that someone is going to speak out against it. Additionally, People are more likely to voice opinions they feel the team will support, regardless of whether this is the best idea. This is the yes man syndrome, but trust me, you need a healthy dose of skepticism to keep things balanced. Perhaps the most famous pitfall is the phenomenon called groupthink, which is when otherwise good groups start to center around bad ideas. Some of the common things that lead to groupthink include a highly charismatic and likable leader, high levels of cohesion in the group, and illusions of invulnerability, among other things. A common sentiment in groupthink is, how can this be a bad idea? We thought of it. Obviously, this can spiral into dangerous territory when left unchecked. So here's how you can defend against these issues. Keep the leader quiet. The leader should ask questions, not offer ideas, at least at the beginning. If the leader offers an idea, it's much more likely that the rest of the group will be stifled. Another thing you can do is appoint a devil's advocate. This person's job is to point out the negative. One key thing here, though, is to make sure you switch up who has this role. If it's always the same person, people are going to start disliking them. Another is to have second chance meetings. At these, analyze how and why you made the decision and look for potential issues. And a final strategy is to run concurrent solution groups and then compare. No matter what you do, remember that the more cohesive and high-functioning your group is, the more likely it is to fall into these traps. Ironic, right? Keep your team honest and keep yourself focused on the best solution possible. Congratulations on completing this course on critical thinking and problem solving. Now you're ready to start the work. Practice. We live in a world where information, both factual and falsified, are accessible at our fingertips. So all the information in the world is still no match for critical thinking. And it's a skill that you need to practice to ensure you grow into a thoughtful, adept leader. I encourage you to start today by implementing some of the strategies I shared in this course. Take a little extra time to really analyze a source or ask clarifying questions when you're not sure you understand. Check your ego at the door and see what you learn. If you want to do more of your own research on critical thinking, and I really suggest you do, I encourage you to check out the Foundation for Critical Thinking website. Stop Guessing: The 9 Behaviors of Great Problem Solvers and Other Books by Nat Green, and listen to Data Skeptic and the Skeptic's Guide podcast. And for even more resources, check out my other courses on leadership that are available on this platform. Finally, stay in touch. I would love to hear from you. Connect with me on LinkedIn and visit my websites at effectivenessconsultants.com and idiusinc.com. Thank you for taking this course, and good luck. I know that with some preparation and forethought, you're well on your way to solving whatever problems come your way.
I'm Randall Elliott, an Associate Director of Design Technology at Frog, a global digital transformation and strategy firm that transforms businesses through design and innovation that advances the human experience. At Frog, we've used design approaches throughout our 45-year history to discover what makes meaningful connections with people. This course will share how we use data intelligence to create more human experiences. Whether it's data collected from speaking to people or captured from computers and coalesced by data scientists, these are core inputs to creative problem solving. This is often called design thinking. Businesses around the world are using this to open new markets and create competitive advantage. In this course, you'll learn how data intelligence can generate ideas, solve complex problems, and connect with people in meaningful ways. While this course won't cover in-depth data science instruction, it will identify how to integrate data intelligence into your teams, as well as how to approach and explore the technology that makes it intelligent. If you've heard about how data intelligence creates new experiences, or read about companies who are using it to explore new markets, and wondered how you could bring meaningful experiences to people with it, then this course is for you. Plus, we've added an interactive feature to the course, enabling you to collaborate with others and help data intelligence inform your design decisions. Okay, let's go. For a moment, imagine what it was like when we had little data and therefore could not offer much information to the people who used our products and services. Here's an example. Remember when an electronic device simply told us when it was about to run out of power? Sometimes we were told what percentage of battery was left, but that was it. Today we're notified how many movies we can watch or ways to save power and extend use. Did you catch the distinction between those? In the past, we were provided with very little helpful information. Almost nothing about how much time was left or what we could expect from it. While today we receive clues to help us experience more from the product. Let's take a moment and take a deeper look at the evolution of these examples. When we have valuable data, we are able to make it more valuable by making some inferences. Simply put, an inference is a conclusion reached on the basis of evidence and reasoning. This data enables us to design the use of these inferences in a way that can be communicated clearly to our customers. In this case, we estimated how much power was left and then inferred what you may be able to do with it, for how long, and how you might save power. To make the value even clearer, what if we had simply displayed all the raw data? Like, let them know that their battery, for example, is 1.5 volts and maybe 1.6 when full and 1.1 when almost empty, then told them the rate of change of their battery in volts. Do you see how those values on their own did little to impact the person's experience? Then when we apply design thinking and user-centered design, we turn those values into something immediately tangible. The way that we chose to communicate those inferences regarding battery life changed the human experience. It gave us more capabilities through intelligence. The data intelligence was there, and when we applied design thinking, that data became even more valuable. That synergy between data and design and its output we call design intelligence. We have many design methodologies and frameworks we've developed. From designing forms to techniques that reduce the cognitive load on a person, in design, we don't have a shortcoming when it comes to best practices for just about anything, except for data intelligence. Do a quick Google search on data science or data design, and you will mostly see database, data structure, data visualization, and voice interaction best practices. There are a few gems here and there, though, so check out the course links and book recommendations. But when you sit down with your team to create and you'd like to leverage data intelligence, where do you start? We really need a framework that connects the needs of the people we are designing for to the valuable data intelligence we have. Here's a framework to use during ideation and concept creation when you'd like to consider how using data intelligence may create even better solutions. Instead of getting wrapped up in the details and specifics with actual models, algorithms, or technologies, we'll use this framework that is focused on helping the people who use your stuff. So this framework helps describe how machine intelligence enables, from the perspective of someone's experience rather than focusing on the literal technology or algorithms. It consists of 4 enablers, or answers to the person or business need: humanize, expedite, transform, and discover. Let's break these down one by one and talk about how needs of people translate into each of these. If you hear from people that something you currently provide or represent in a concept is hard to decipher, you might try humanizing the experience to further clarify it. How might we humanize a machine-based interaction? The most common application of this solution we see today is personalization. For example, think about how someone you have known for years is typically easy to talk to and understands your needs. This is because they personalize the output so you have more context. In the near future, we will have even a wider history of recorded experiences to design around. Okay, let's move on to the next design intelligence enabler: expedite. Are you looking to free up time for your customers or the business so they can intervene in tasks that technology is not yet ready to handle? Perhaps they want to be part of those interactions because of the human value they bring to it, or the emotional value it delivers them. Leveraging data intelligence to expedite or replace rote, repetitive tasks enables machines to free up humans to deliver their best value to your business. Consider this possible design intelligence enabler whenever your customers could use some time to perform more valuable tasks. All right, now on to the next enabler: transform. When framing a design challenge around an organization, the people and its values were often looking for opportunities to transform the business. In this case, transform data intelligence you have on market opportunities or customer behavior into an input used to frame your organization goals and how you might achieve those. For our final enabler, discover, we can use any patterns of needs uncovered by data intelligence to reveal new ways to make the human experience a better one. For example, if a wholly new need is discovered, then it can be used to develop a new product or service, or they could identify the need for a new design solution. To get on a very personal level with your customers, these discoveries could proactively help those who may be in need of assistance before they reach out or complain. Lastly, these could guide them as they use your products so they have less points of resistance. So the next time you have some valuable inputs from machine intelligence, design intelligently by asking yourself if any one of these 4 enablers might drive a design that fulfills the need of your customers in a new or previously unimaginable way. You and your design team are about to hit the field for research that will include observations from customers framed by those you've made by interviewing stakeholders. You've also been blessed with a data scientist to offer some new perspectives on your customers, product, and business. How do you incorporate that data intelligence into your insights and ideas? How do you transform these perhaps disparate data points into a concept that you can rally around? To help transform those ideas, create something that serves as the singular source of truth. That way, the data intelligence you have becomes part of what feeds into your ideas. When you succeed at this, you'll find that more will become the hero of a concept. Another great value of doing this is that you can demonstrate an evidence-based guess. That's right, it means just what it sounds like. You have data that serves as evidence for your design hypothesis. In a nutshell, if you have a hunch or even an observation, there may be data intelligence to back it up, potentially making it more valuable or providing necessary proof for that skeptical stakeholder. But that means you must directly incorporate those inputs along with your observations during synthesis. And how do you do that? Systemize your source collection and insight development. That means make sure that, along with analog recording methods, everything is systematically recorded digitally. This could be a spreadsheet that everyone uses during research, like the one here. Every column should have a selection where possible, so when entering unstructured or free-form data, every bit is categorized in the same way. Also note how each one is coded so everything may be cross-referenced. These codes are often best designed to capture important references, such as geography, customer, company, or even market segment. Imagine what happens when you incorporate something like a standard spreadsheet into every bit of research you conduct. One immediate benefit I've noticed is we can correlate what the stakeholders feel the customer needs with observations we've made meeting with customers. Before we go any further, it's important that we talk about ongoing data conversion. You see, as a group, you'll likely still leverage analog recordings, Post-its and worksheets. So an individual or group will need to be responsible for recording these insights. They, in turn, become the field recorder. Now that you have a system to collect your data digitally, you can leverage your data scientists and statistical programmers to cluster the data. We're not going to go deep here, as this is so dependent on the project and could be a course in and of itself, but we will touch on what this means and the value it can provide. In a nutshell, you can use algorithms to group observations, and you can also cluster these to create insights. These can then be compared and contrasted to the insights you've come up with. You can get really fancy, paired into those alike and compared to the norm to help eliminate any bias that may be unknowingly introduced. Last but not least, this is a fantastic way to verify what may be most valuable to research and experiment further. Next time you're putting a research plan together, make sure you find a way to create a structured digital artifact of your observations. Record what you find during synthesis and create a single source where these all live together. Oh, and make sure other findings are recorded there too throughout your process. These strategies to digitize your observations and insights will allow you to uncover more data intelligence. The digitization of our world has brought with it the ability to track nearly every action of our customers. This has provided us with more feedback and data than ever. Have you ever sought feedback on a solution you and your team were working on? You likely did in hopes that it would help you evolve or validate it. We often find that the most valuable feedback is able to provide us with clear direction. But what happens if we receive so much feedback that there are many points of view? What if they are at conflict with one another? It can be downright overwhelming. It's because we have too many directions or so much feedback that it actually makes it less clear. In contrast, if we receive only one form of input, we often feel like we haven't received enough feedback to derive a sense of direction. Today, it can be easy to look at the data we collect, such as A/B testing, being the only or most important form of feedback. It's become easy, so sometimes we don't scrutinize it or seek feedback from other sources. Worse yet, sometimes we see it as the end of the test and the direct input to the next, instead of the beginning of another concept or experiment. What do I mean by experiment? Testing concepts used to be viewed almost exclusively as an experiment. We'd test it, look at the results, and attempt to infer the outcome. Then we'd create a new one and test again. Unfortunately, with data today, we often see what used to be deemed experiments used as exclusive tests that do not seek alternative explanations or solutions from other research. This can be hard to grasp at first, so let's use an example. Imagine we work for a huge online shopping site, such as Amazon, and our design team has been told that we need to find ways to help people buy 4K televisions easier. We learn that this new ask is largely because they have some recent data showing that customers looking to purchase these fancy new TVs have an extremely low rate of completing their purchases. We could start by making some educated guesses as to why they are having trouble completing their purchase, devise several alternative ways to purchase, and pick two to test. Then, based on the results of the test, select the best one and create 2 modified versions to test again until one showed significant increase in purchases. That sounds logical, but what if perhaps the failure occurred in our test time frame, unknown human behavior, or execution? We'd likely not know that from our A or B tests alone, which means we can't say for sure one performed better than the other, or that either would really help the person purchase a TV. The bottom line is when we look at it so narrowly, it seems like a good way to judge experiences and reduce the risk of failure to the business. The problem with this approach is that it absolutely ignores all kinds of other inputs. I call that data paralysis. Instead, we should start by looking at customer complaints, talk to people interested in purchasing those TVs, develop a few ideas, in addition to running some tests, walk some of those folks through our concepts. That way, we can see and hear what helps people buy these fancy new TVs. Now we have a sense of direction and data to inform our designs. Don't forget the data is still valuable. When coupled with design research, it can reduce the amount of people needed in your study, thereby reducing costs and potentially enabling you to go deeper with your contextual studies. That could also lead to uncovering new research and the people whom you should interview. I don't know about you, but I feel like in the past when these new ways to provide us feedback emerged, we focused too much on them alone, potentially missing many opportunities to truly transform the human experience. So let's move forward and continue to seek more feedback from data and leverage it to infer how we may better answer our customers' needs. Go forth and experiment. Okay, so you have everything recorded, including digital versions of your observations, hypotheses, and insights. Now, how can you include data intelligence in your ideation and concept development? In the room you will be ideating and creating concepts, write these 4 questions in a prominent place. Do you need to provide more clarity? Do you need to provide or save more time? Do you need to better frame customer challenges or organizational goals? Do you need to provide more or proactive guidance? If these sound familiar, they are questions derived from the 4 design intelligence enablers: humanize, expedite, transform, and discover. As you create your early ideas, all those initial seed ideas that contribute to your selected concepts, use these techniques to leverage data intelligence. The first is the pivot. After you come up with a concept, or after someone else shares theirs out, ask yourself if it is solving any of those 4 questions. If it does, take each one it answers and pivot it into a concept that solves it by using data intelligence. For example, let's say a teammate created a concept to reduce the time it takes for a customer to check out. Using the pivot, you'd ask yourself, instead of reducing the checkout time, how might I provide them with more time to shop using data intelligence? Worksheets can serve as a great analog recording device and a fantastic method to note what data points you folded in. So make sure to download the worksheets available in the exercise files section. Please pause the video if you have not already downloaded the Data Intelligence Concept Worksheet. For the best experience, you'll want to print a few out and follow along. Okay, so now that we have the worksheet and something to write with, let's walk through it together. Oh, and if you're already smack dab in the middle of a project, feel free to follow along and use your observations from your research to try it out. Use this worksheet to prompt wholly new concepts. Keep it focused on the person by pulling needs and pain points from your research. This is why the worksheet starts with identifying one of those as a foundation for your concept. Okay, so now you see why the next step of the worksheet asks, what value can we provide the person to? Followed by values from the 4 technology enablers. Save them time, help them understand, guide them, or make them smarter. Use as many of these as you like. If you'd like a greater breadth of ideas, try running each need or pain point through a worksheet to develop many disparate ideas rapidly. On the other hand, if you want more depth, try taking the same ones another direction until you've absolutely exhausted your ideas. You'll find that by adding intelligence with human needs in mind to your concepts, you'll create more valuable experiences. Let me know how you use the worksheet and any modifications or tricks you may have added. Best of luck. With the popularity of big data, many companies have amassed an unbelievable amount of data around their businesses and their customers. In the last 5 years, data analytics and science have ushered in ways to leverage all of this data as companies look for new ways to use it. This quest for deriving value from the data has led to the proliferation of artificial intelligence and its strategies such as machine learning. So now many companies are looking to leverage the data they've gathered by designing innovative customer experiences. Let's pause a moment and define some of these new terms. Big data refers to extremely large data sets that may be analyzed computationally to reveal patterns, trends, and associations, especially relating to human behavior and interactions. Artificial intelligence generally refers to machines that can think in some ways like humans. Machine learning is commonly associated with AI and is a field of computer science that gives computers the ability to learn without being explicitly programmed. Data science applies the scientific method to data as a means to infer valuable evidence that can be used to form new ideas. Now that that's all out of the way, let's talk about how data scientists and designers think and work. In general, scientists use a methodology called the scientific method to solve problems. They study an organism or an organization, they form a hypothesis, test it, and record the results. Often those results lead to a new one, and the process is repeated. Designers use a variety of methodologies and apply processes that frame the problem, and develop a point of view, learn about people to develop deep insights, and make a solution to test and learn more. Did you catch those similarities? The two approach problems and seek solutions in much the same way. Now that's great and everything, but just because they're similar doesn't necessarily mean they're complementary. Well, think about it this way. Quite often, when we arrive at a solution based on research, we're still working with just a hunch. While we have a plethora of user validation and testing methodologies, they often fall short. It's a delicate balance. The people that use our products provide the feedback. This provides much data and must continue to do so for us to provide the best experience. So you see, their input provides the solution, while we've got to have data science to develop the mechanisms to accomplish that. To illustrate this, take a moment and think of all the recommendation services we see today. Recommendation services could be suggesting the next movie to watch or an advertisement customized for your needs or shopping preferences. There are hundreds and perhaps thousands of permutations of these today. Now think of the ones that actually provide real value to you. The ones that make your life easier or tell your friends how cool it is. You can only think of just a few, right? Okay, so how do data scientists and designers actually complement each other? I'll let you in on a little secret. The successful ones utilize a well-crafted orchestration of a design that creates less friction while collecting data that can make the experience even more personalized. Make sure you lay the foundation for collaboration between design and data science on each project. We find that by planning from the beginning parallel tracks of work with shared collaboration moments along with milestones to be most effective. Designers and data scientists approach challenges in a similar fashion. When coupled with shared tasks and goals, they create beautiful experiences that make our lives better. It may seem like these new technologies are too complex to rapidly prototype, but you'd be wrong. If you assemble the right team of multidisciplinary designers, everything is possible. There are two approaches to rapidly prototype with data by co-designing with a data scientist. The first is using a data-driven prototyping approach. Those let you import real data into your web and mobile prototypes and build dynamic data lists and data grids within charts, menus, and other data simulations that actually behave like the real thing. The second approach is through data prototypes. These act as descriptions of a technique, either through a proof of concept or just an example of how raw data has been transformed into something meaningful to your users. For the first approach, data-driven, you'll need to collaborate early on while you're both performing design and data research. That way, you'll be able to integrate real data from the data scientist's research. Then, you and your data partner will be able to discuss which data-driven prototyping tool best supports your needs. This synergy of collaborative research and data-driven prototyping guarantees you'll bring some of your best concepts forward. A few tools you'll want to consider for data-driven prototypes are Just in Mind, InVision, and Azure. We'll not be diving into these during this course, rather we'll be providing you with frameworks along with skill and team building strategies. If you want to dive into these after you complete the course, you're in the right place. We have a number of great courses covering those applications right here. To use the second method, the data prototypes approach, data prototypes are much like design prototypes. Just like how you sketch an experience, you can work with your data scientists to mock up the result of their work. This can be an example of how the raw or original data looks, and then what it becomes when they transform it into a valuable insight. Using these data prototypes, you can then articulate how you would leverage them, how they would be communicated to your customers and to your business. These prototypes can range from brief descriptions of how you would transform the data and a presentation communicating the value it provides through concept sketches, examples pulled from another industry, or even books or movies that have inspired the creation. Other times you may need to work with a technologist to use fake data provided by the data scientist and integrate it into a basic application to act as a proof of concept. Selecting which technologies are appropriate is an entire course in itself. But suffice it to say, we can build real-looking digital products very rapidly today with motivated teams who have a diverse skill set of technology and design. Okay, we have two branches of rapid prototyping with data: data-driven prototyping and data prototypes. So which one do we use? Choosing which one will most likely have to do with time and the skill set available. If you need to move fast and you've got a small team of a designer and a data scientist, go with data-driven prototyping. If you have more time and have designers who can work conceptually with science and technology, go the data prototyping route. Solving problems through design has developed into many methodologies over the last several decades. One of the most prominent methodologies is design thinking. Design thinking is a method for practical, creative resolution of problems. It can be used to solve just about any kind of problem. It's a form of solution-based thinking with the intent of producing a constructive future result. Often it's human-centered, meaning it focuses on who it will be providing the solution for. A key to this creative problem solving is framing. Framing simply means accurately identifying the challenge and who needs your help. By identifying the problem, we can focus our ideation only on the most important needs of the people using our product. Data intelligence is a fairly new input to design. Often it comes from more of a science methodology, and it starts with a hypothesis. One thing to note: it can be helpful in many situations to treat data intelligence like an organizational specialty or technology that gives an edge to the business, rather than getting too caught up in the fact that it comes from data intelligence. Another way you can leverage data intelligence is by incorporating it within your design thinking strategies. Since design thinking uses both analysis and synthesis, design intelligence can help frame the problem very well. So once we frame it, how can it actually help solve the problem? To explore many possibilities, we use divergent thinking and use convergent thinking to narrow and select those that solve the challenge best. Injecting data intelligence at this stage can be super helpful in two ways. You can look for ways to solve the problem using data intelligence to come up with potentially wholly new ideas, or you may use it to seek ways that bolsters existing ideas as a way to narrow the solutions you further design. As you can see, there are many ways that design intelligence can help us frame the problem, and it can help us choose the best solution. Many people are once again concerned about machines taking their jobs, and for many designers, it's now their time to worry. This stems from a variety of recent machine learning techniques that automate some of what used to be decisions made by human designers. We've seen this especially within marketing and advertising, due to several recent innovations that customize the ads and target who receives them using artificial intelligence. In addition to this, big companies such as Google are experimenting with computer-generated art, so it's not surprising that many people have jumped to the conclusion that it won't be long until computers can develop designs for ads and products. At the same time, Harvard and many other prestigious institutions are encouraging several vocations that in the past weren't associated with needing specialized design skills to do just that. In fact, in a recent Harvard Business article, the number 4 recommendation for managers was to work like a designer. They even went on to say, while managers' own creative abilities are vital, perhaps even more important is their ability to harness others' creativity. As you see, it really depends on the lens you look through. It can be very the sky is falling or incredibly futuristic. Personally, I prefer the opportunistic and the futuristic. In the past, we tended to hear only about the data marketing snafus that focused on invading our privacy through data. These were largely ad and marketing focused. Today, companies and researchers are using techniques like machine learning to predict minute behavior patterns. Some are even using these to intelligently create extremely complex digital personas that can then be used to model and predict what they might do or say. This might be hard to grasp or imagine at first, so let's start with a well-known example: Facebook Predictive Political Analysis. You likely have heard about this and might even look your own up if you use Facebook. By analyzing millions of data points, Facebook has developed a system that can predict where you are on the political spectrum and how politically active. Think about that for a moment. Let it set in. We have the means to understand if someone is liberal or very liberal and how likely they would be to engage politically. A person's politics can be incredibly complex, something that is tied into their belief systems, morals, culture, and even religious views. We can accomplish the above by analyzing their behaviors, making a model, and then testing it against millions of other similar data points and people. As you can now imagine, many are rapidly experimenting with these technologies to literally drive a better user experience for their customers and employees. For example, cybersecurity has been a big issue recently with data breaches happening nearly every month. Securing this data has become big business, and it's difficult to do well. So institutions are experimenting with using behavior analysis to create predictive personas in order to prevent people from doing something malicious before it happens. Think of it like an early warning system for weather. It analyzes user behavior on the networks and compares it to models to predict what they might do or not do. How might you use predictive analysis to improve your product's design? If you stumble a bit with this, check out the link to the worksheet included with this course. It is designed to help you unblock and unlock new ideas around using design intelligence to predict. Perhaps you want to know what your customers need before they have to ask. Or maybe you want to be able to introduce them to other services that people like them found the most useful. Give it a shot and let me know in the course comments your favorite ideas and how you executed them. Please share failures and success stories. We've all heard by now how big data, machine learning, and artificial intelligence are impacting our world. What we may not realize is that this affects how we design new products and services today. It's something we should be prepared for today by acquiring a new skill set. Ironically, it's like not thinking about how your company may be interacted with using a smartphone. Technology like AI is such a moving target that it is hard to see sometimes. After all, AI is often defined as something not before achievable by a machine, which means once a machine can, it's technically no longer considered intelligent. Once again, it's just a machine following a program. Understanding these new technologies, techniques, and inputs can frame our design challenges today and future-proof them. So what are the most valuable and fastest ways you can become more skilled at leveraging data intelligence? Future designers' greatness will likely be judged by how well they train the intelligence systems to interact with us. They will have to design them so others are able to train them as well. That shift in the focus of design will change the necessary skills needed. First, thanks to intelligent machines, people will be freed to apply design thinking even more broadly. Second, more people will be needed to design how we interact with the products and services of tomorrow. Lastly, most people will need an understanding of how intelligent systems work so they have the knowledge to create new ideas. So if you don't consider yourself a designer, either by occupation or education, you should acquire design thinking skills. There are several great integrated design programs, if formal education is an option, such as the Integrated Design Program at MIT or the University at Texas. However, if formal education is not an option, look into those design programs' curriculum to see what knowledge areas and skills are covered. Then research them online and in books on your own time. You can gain much knowledge on your own if you're motivated to seek it out and study. Also, there are several online and fast-paced programs that teach design thinking. A great start is by watching the other courses in the design thinking series right here. If you're a designer, add technology and psychology skills to your repertoire. Learning some basic Python data science skills today is quite simple and rewarding. It will make you a valuable partner to a data scientist colleague. Several companies that provide data intelligence services like Google and Microsoft also provide simple introductions to using their service and will have you up and running quickly. If you're unable to take a few psychology courses, consider reading some of the books pertaining to AI and psychology listed in my course recommendations. So whether you are a designer or a CEO, the future will require design thinking skills and intelligent systems knowledge. It will be our responsibility to design these to treat us as we would want to be treated. It will also be a great opportunity to shape how we interact with the intelligent products of tomorrow. You'd like to design intelligent things, huh? Well, you just need these 3 skills: programming, data science, and business knowledge. That's all you say? Kidding aside, what if you don't have all those? Perhaps you have never programmed, or it has been many years in a language long ago. Maybe you know about statistics and analytics, but lack the skills to perform those duties. Nothing to fear, my friends. If you desire to work with artificial intelligence to design intelligent products, you simply need the right partners. Just like any business, having the right partners can make the difference between failure and success. So let's start by talking a bit about the kinds of people who are able to use AI to design intelligent products and services. First, the programmers. These folks will either be statistical programmers or likely have the word data prefixed to their titles, such as data analyst or data processor. Next, the data scientists. This is a relatively new practice that usually involves someone who has received traditional teaching in how to apply the scientific method and might have focused in a particular area of science. In addition to their science teachings, they have also focused on data research, analytics, and statistics. Often, they also have programming experience as well. You'll need folks with business knowledge, too. They are often business strategists or those who have focused in business, whether it be formal education, job experience, or entrepreneurships. Lastly, in some or all of the categories, you'll need people with mathematical knowledge. Having people with this knowledge is foundational. The sum of your new partner's expertise should include probability, statistics, linear algebra, and mathematical optimization. The whole point of this is that it's okay if you don't even really know what those are. Surround yourself with team members who do. In addition to new skills, you will likely need new partners that have skills you are unable to rapidly acquire. These new partners should cover these 3 areas: programming, data science, and business knowledge. In addition to these, they should have a good mathematical foundation for working with artificial intelligence and especially concepts like machine learning. For more detailed information, check out the course links and let me know how you use this to build a team for the future. Designing with intelligent systems, whether they simply provide data that alters content for site visitors or can actually design themselves, requires each discipline to better support the people that interact with them by evolving their craft. As a designer, we are all likely already working with data intelligence in some way. After all, it's impossible to ignore. So it comes to no surprise that we want to know how to learn and do more. In this new world, as designers, we are responsible for creating a safe and natural interaction with these machines, whether we are teaching them or they are learning from the people that utilize our products or services. Visual designers who design DLS, design language systems, will have to evolve their systems thinking to support dynamic systems, while interaction designers will deepen their understanding of human interactions with machines as teachers and guides. For UX and UI designers, there are opportunities to evolve how you design the experience and how the user interfaces can best support design intelligence. For the technologists, especially design technologists, gaining knowledge of the data and technologies that enable designing with intelligence can evolve your discipline rapidly. Couple that with learning how to prototype intelligent systems, and you have a huge opportunity to play an important role in the new designs. Any designer or technologist will stand to prosper greatly by evolving their craft to help design with intelligence. For most, it simply involves flexing those research muscles and learning as much as they can about the technologies and possibilities. It truly is an exciting time for design and our design practices. What happens when the model or data produces a value? Is the output of an algorithm inherently valuable? The answer to both is no. It's all about the delivery of that output. Central to our charter at Frog is improving the human experience through design. Big data is, well, big, and everyone is capturing oceans of it in hopes of gaining new insights through intelligence. But how does this make meaningful connections to people? Perhaps Cecilia Aragon, director of the Human-Centered Data Science Lab at the University of Washington, said it best by posing the question, how can we be sure not to lose the compelling and inspiring stories of individuals in the sea of aggregated data at scale? Data science can provide this intelligence, creating new connections to the people whom experience your design. We've been using charts, graphs, and visualizations for a long time to tell a story, perhaps even longer than you'd imagine. In fact, one of the first data visualizations is sunspots over time by Shiner in 1625, and the first time for a new visualization technique. That technique was later called the principle of small multiples by Tufte. What Shiner did even way back then was order the data in a way that illustrated the small changes. This is very similar to how we transform data using algorithms, so we may better tell a story with that data. This would totally make sense if we could simply look at and play with the data visualization in real time. It would be so cool if we had a tool to do that. In fact, I've made such a tool. This is using data from logged observations of interactions within a dolphin community in New Zealand. They identified and named each dolphin. Then every time a dolphin had an interaction with another, they logged it. Here's what that data looks like when transformed into a format called JSON. It's just a bunch of data. And you can see all of these interactions, and they're not very organized. But now look what happens when we use algorithms to transform that data visually. For example, you can see now, even with this first algorithm, a little bit of clustering. It's not very helpful, and it's pretty close to what the raw data probably looks like to your brain. But when we actually apply just a simple algorithm called breadth first, we can actually instantly see a transformation in the data. We can see that one dolphin looks like a really popular dolphin and perhaps is connected in every way to all the other dolphins in the community. Now, if we apply another algorithm that's a circular algorithm, we get another view of the same data, because of how the algorithm here is showing us maybe clusters of areas around this circle where it's denser than others, which might mean that many parts of the communities, right, are more active than maybe some of these other areas that are quite sparse. Then we can apply yet another algorithm that starts to use some clustering techniques. So now we actually see these sort of little communities within the communities. And we can start to infer that maybe this is a group of dolphins that have known each other for a long time. Maybe they're family. Maybe they have a role to play in the community. Maybe they protect the community or they're lookouts. And this data really starts to come to life. What this means to your business and customers is think for a moment that this data isn't about a dolphin community, it's about all of your customers and the communities within your customers that use your products and services. Think about how that could be applied to this. Think of what you could learn about your customers and your business by looking at the data in new ways using these visual algorithms.